Remember that I have said that algebra is a branch of mathematics that focuses on two areas. The first area is the number systems, which we spend time studying in lesson 1 and lesson 2. And the second part of algebra is studying the properties of numbers by generalizing them as symbols. Lesson 3 and beyond will be looking at exactly how to do that. Our attention now is on algebraic expressions. Before we can jump right into algebraic expressions, it's important to build the foundation by looking at a couple of terminologies that we're going to need in understanding algebraic expressions. The first term that we need to study is called a variable. This is a letter or a symbol that represents any number. So if we can take a symbol or a letter X to represent any number. So this is to say that X can be 1, or it can be 2, or it can be a 3, or even maybe it can be a 10. So this means that X it varies, it changes, it varies. It's not one number. It can be 1, 2, 3, a 10, or even a billion. It varies. Hence we call it a variable, right? It's a letter that represents any number that varies. The second term that we need to understand is called a constant. A constant is a number that always has the same value. So this one, we assign a value to it. Maybe I say it is a 2, right? This number doesn't change no matter what. It always remains a 2. Then we call it a constant. There are many other constants. It could be a 5. No matter what happens, this number is not going to change. It's always going to be a 5. So it can be any real number. And again, this is the reason why we started studying number systems, because now we are generalizing those number systems into symbols, or we are using them as variables or constants, right, when we study algebra. So it's very important that you master lesson 1 and 2, going beyond even to grade 11 and 12. The third term that we are going to look at is called a coefficient. A coefficient is a number in front of a variable or a group of variables. So for an example, we can have 2x, right? This number here is called a coefficient. The 2 in front of the variable. Remember, an x, we said, is a variable. Any letter that would change, that would represent any number, is a variable because it changes. But if there's a number in front of that letter, we call it a coefficient. It is important not to confuse a coefficient with a constant, because a coefficient is not a constant. What I mean is that if we know the value of x, let's say x is 1, that means here we are going to have 2 times a 1, and this will give us a 2. But because the x changes, it varies, it's a variable. If then the x becomes a 2, it means now we're going to have a 2 times a 2, and now we're going to have a 4. And if the x is a 3 now, you're going to have 2 times a 3, it gives you a 6. So you can see that this number is not a constant. It also would change as the x changes. The whole number here, this whole number 2x, varies depending on what the value of x is. So this 2x is a number in front of a variable. Sometimes we have a number in front of a group of variables. So you can have something like a 7xy. Do you see that we have a group of variables? We have two variables, more than one variable. But in front of that variable, there is a constant. There is not a constant, but a coefficient, I meant to say. There is a number in front of these variables. It doesn't necessarily have to be in front of one variable. It can also exist between a group of variables. And again, it is not a constant, because if our x and y varies, it will also change. The whole number here will change. All these three concepts are important in helping us to understand what we call an algebraic expression, usually just called expression. An algebraic expression is a combination of variables and constant that are separated by mathematical operations. Remember that mathematical operations, we have 4 mathematical operations. It's a positive, a negative, multiplication, and division. Right? Now, if you have variables and constant that are separated, that are combined in one place, but they're separated by these operations, we call that an expression. How do I mean? If you were to have a variable x, but it is separated by a positive, and we have a constant 1, we call this whole thing an expression, because it's a combination of variable and a constant, and they're separated by a mathematical operation plus. There are many expressions that exist, right? Maybe I can give you another example, like 2. Let's say you have a 2x squared plus 3x minus a 6. Do you see that we have a variable here? Well, we have a variable x squared here that has a coefficient of 2, right? And this is separated by a plus here. Then we have another variable here, x, that is a coefficient of 3, and they are separated by a negative in this case. This whole thing is called an expression or algebraic expression because it combines variables that are separated by mathematical operations, plus and minus, right? And as I said, there are many expressions that we'll be doing from grade 10 to grade 12 that we'll be solving, right, and dealing with. So we'll see a lot more expressions. The other concept that we need to understand is called a term. A term is an individual quantity connected by a positive or negative in an algebraic expression. So if we have an algebraic expression like this one here, right, the part that is separated by a plus or a negative is called a term. In other words, this thing here is called a term because it is separated from 1 by a plus. And the plus also on its own, it is separated from an x by the 1, it is separated from an x by a plus here. So the 1 itself is also a term, right? If you look at 2x squared, right, is a term because it is separated from 3x by a plus. And the 3x is also a term because it is separated from 2x squared by a plus. and also separated from a 6 by a negative. So it is also a term. The 6 here is also a term, right? It's a constant term, right? Because it is separated from 3x by that negative, right? So these numbers that get separated by a plus or negative are called terms, right? Now there is monomial expression, right? Monomial expression is simply an expression, right, that has only one term, right? So this could be something like 2x. If you look at here, 2x is a monomial expression, right? It is only one term, right? It is only one term. Then we also have polynomials, right? A polynomial is an expression made up of two or more terms, right? When we have an expression that has two or more terms, we call that a polynomial. The word polynomial means many, That's why we have two or more, right? And the word monomial means one. That's why we only had one term. Now, polynomials can further be divided into what we call a binomial. Now, bi means two. So this will be an expression that is made up of two terms, right? So something like 2x plus 1, or x minus 1, or even the x plus 1, right? They are all called binomials because I have two terms in them. There is also what we call a trinomial. The tri means 3. So this means that this expression here that we studied here is a trinomial because it has 3 terms. So if I have 2x squared plus 3x minus 6, that's a trinomial. There are many other trinomials that we can have. We can have xy plus x to the power 3 plus maybe y squared, right? I'm just creating one at the top of my head. Because I have 3 terms here, we call this a trinomial.